Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Mark Medley Show. This is my second edition, and I'm coming to you live to talk a little bit about, are the presidential debates reflective of where we are as a society? I think I've watched the presidential debates more this cycle than I ever have throughout my lifetime. And that's because I guess as you get older, things like this matter to you more. But as I watch these various debates and the actions of those who are participating in the I was listening to a talk show this morning because I have truly become a talk show and news junkie in terms of not so much looking at it from a negative perspective, but just from the standpoint of looking at trends. And as I looked and I see the various news stories of folks getting killed, as I said, by other folks that have nothing to do with them, I was listening to a talk show this morning and the guest was saying how much killing that we witness and we see on a daily basis, that children constantly watching television and movies and video games, that they're constantly seeing people killing people, human beings killing other human beings. And the psychologist went on to say how a 4-year-old child had said something along the lines of, I don't see people killing animals on television. I see people killing other people. So the show host asked the psychologist, how old was this child? And the psychologist said the child was 4. And he said, don't you find that strange that a 4-year-old would be able to make that observation? And the psychologist said no, because that's what the child has been exposed to for the most part since it's been here. That our children are constantly faced with killing. So I tie that into what you're seeing here in terms of our presidential debates, because the behavior of these allegedly educated men and women is deplorable. If you look at the debates, as I have, and I'm sure, and I'm not the only one that thinks this way, and let me put the disclaimer out there right now. The thoughts and opinions here are totally mine, totally the host. Has nothing to do with my profession, what I do outside of here. The thoughts and opinions are totally those. In the United States, not a one of them. They got into a bunch of rhetoric, they got into a bunch of name calling. Clear on his feelings about how Mexico is not going to pay for this wall that Donald Trump keeps hollering about that they're going to pay for. He was extremely clear on that, and matter of fact, used an expletive to express his feelings. And to be truth be told, I cannot blame Vicente one bit, because Donald Trump deserved that based on how he's coming at them. And then the duplicity and the hypocrisy of it all, if you think in terms of the very things that Donald Trump has said on the air during these debates, for him to be talking about Vicente Fox owes an apology, had that been him, it would have been. But the truth of the matter is, Donald, that has been you. You were the one standing up there throwing the word hell and the word that we use for feces, the slang term. That was you. That's you up there talking about how we're going to bomb you fill in the blank out of them. Who gives that's you. And then you had one of the female supporters, I guess she was a supporter, but she was in the audience. She now uses the slang that is used for a female body part, the vagina. Also, the word is put in front of willow. The word is also put in front of cat. Slang. So now he says, no, you can't say that, and then turns around and repeats the exact word that she just said that he said she couldn't say. So for him to be now talking about some Vicente Fox owes an apology for the use of his language, this is the pot calling the pot a pot. The same holds true for now all of a sudden Donald Trump feel like he's Ben Carson's defender. He's talking about Ted Cruz. Oh, what terrible behavior in Iowa. Ted Cruz used Ben Carson, set Ben Carson up, talking about Ben is dropping out of the race and how many votes he stole. Seriously, do you honestly think that that many votes was cited for Ben's? Yet, again, with the duplicity and with the hypocrisy, does he not forget how much he had a tirade about Ben back in November? Back in November, he went on a tirade with some excerpts from Ben's book, calling Ben all kinds of names about his story about the knife and it breaking in the belt buckle of the other child and so forth and so on. So the very things Donald Trump is always talking about others doing is the same thing that he does. Very duplicitous. And reality TV. If you look, just about anything and everything goes. It is no holes barred, no boundaries, no filters, anything and everything that goes. And we're seeing that come out in the presidential debates. We have yet to hear how any of these wild statements that these folks are making are going to happen. There's something called a WAG, and it's a wild, you fill in the blank guess. It's the W, the A, and the G. And it's called a WAG. It's a wild blank guess. Well, these are WASs, or was, wild blank statements. They are making these statements just throwing out any old thing. You got Bernie Sanders talking about everybody's going to have free college. How you going to do that, Bernie? You got Donald Trump talking about building a wall that somebody else he's going to dictate is going to pay for. How are you going to make somebody pay for a wall, Donald? You have this one talking about what he is going to do the first day in office. The first day in the chair, he's going to repeal and do this. How are you going to do that the first day? there's a part of me that actually hopes Trump wins. And it's going to be terrible to say because it's for the wrong reasons. But the part of me that would like to see Trump actually get in the chair is for him to see it's not as easy as he thinks it's going to be. He just thinks because his name is Donald Trump, he's going to get in there and wave a magic wand, or just because he says so, that it's going to happen. And he's going to find, just like all the rest have found, it's not that easy in politics. Business and politics are close. They are. They're very close, but they're not exactly the same. There are a lot more bureaucracies that occur in politics that are not necessarily in business. Now, don't get me wrong, I've been in the business world. I'm also now in education. So I do know the politics that are involved in both. I do know the bureaucracies that are involved with both. However, when you now have to deal with Congress, Senate, policies, laws, the Supreme Court, and all the different executive branches and bodies, things just do not move just because you say so. And I get the impression with listening to Donald Trump and even some of the other candidates that they honestly believe that just because they're sitting in the chair and they say so, and because they ask somebody to jump, that they're going to respond with how high. I honestly believe that's what they think is going to happen if they were to get in the president's seat. And so for a very strange reason, I wouldn't mind seeing Donald Trump win just so that he could see that just because he's Donald Trump and just because he said so does not mean that it's going to happen. So if for no other reason than that reason, I would if Trump were to win, just to sit back and watch, just to see the expression on it, because I know what's going to happen. The same way Donald is reacting to when he doesn't get his way in these debates is the same way he's going to react whenever he doesn't get his way in the White House. And the other world leaders are going to respond to him pretty much the same way Vicente Fox has responded to him. And then some. This thing has become such a three-ring circle. Even the Pope has gotten involved. The Pope weighed in. And I happen to agree with the Pope because the Pope was saying, as a Christian, Christians are about building bridges. They are not about building walls. If anything, we're about tearing down walls, about unity, about bringing people together. And that's what the Pope was saying. But everybody took that as, oh, the Pope said Donald Trump is not a Christian. No, he didn't say that. What he said is Christians are about building bridges, not building walls. Now, if the shoe fits, then I guess Donald may have to wear it. But that's not what the Pope said. But the point of the matter is, even the Pope has joined in on this fracas, has joined in on the melee. We've had the Pope, we've had Vicente Fox, who is the former president. We have now Mitt Romney, who is a former candidate. And of course, sure different than whenever I was a child, of the way of what the kids do and what they say, so forth. And I say, are mighty different even from when I was a child, because there are some things that these children say and do to you because my mother and father would have taken me out. They would have taken me out because every report card night, every back to school, the opening back to school in September or whenever it was, my parents came to the school and they had a speech for the entire school career I was in. They would tell the teacher, you have our permission to do what you need to do with Mark, and then you give us a call, and when he gets home, we're going to do what we need to do. Now, I was wise enough that I was not going to take 2 whippings, because at that time the teacher could pop you. They could pop you with a ruler, they could twist your ear, they could put you in the closet, they could put you in the corner. They could do that during that time whenever I was going to school. So then they could do that, and then whenever I would get home, I would get what we all knew as the belt. Now, there's a difference between discipline and abuse. There was no such thing as DIFUS. Parents raised their kids, the neighborhood raised their kids, but we've gotten away from that, and because of that, kids pretty much do and say what they want to do. And I'm not telling you what I think, I'm telling you what I know, because I work in the education industry. I work in a public school in an urban setting, an urban environment. I know what I see, I know what I experience on a daily basis. Much different. So that's what the grandmother was saying. tie it back to what I was saying earlier about the 4-year-old who said, I don't see anybody on television killing animals. I see people killing people. This is what we're coming up in. Now, again, this is my show. These are my opinions. It doesn't have anything to do with my employment. It doesn't have anything to do with my other radio show that I host. It doesn't have anything to do with anything other than this show, The Mark Medley Show, and my personal opinions. The views and opinions are my own. I am not a tattoo fan. I am not. But if you look at people, you see people tattooed all up and down their arms, all around their chest, all down their back, all down their behinds, all up and down their legs, sometimes in their faces, on their heads. To me, that looks like a building filled with graffiti. That looks like a building where a bunch of kids, or grown-ups for that matter, have gotten together with some spray paint and they went and sprayed up a building or a house. Well, that's what these tattoos look like to me on folks' bodies. Now, you may be listening to this saying, well, Mark, I like tattoos. They look good to me. That's a work of art. Well, personally, I don't agree with that. It does not look like a work of art to me. As I said, it looks a mess. It really does. What does that say about you that you have to be painted up and have your body all scarred up? So, again, no boundaries. Everything and anything applies. Now, even on the females, if they have a little rose or something on their shoulder blade or one down on their ankle, whatever, yeah, that's one thing. But it's another thing to have the entire body all tatted up, looking the way that it's looking, and people actually think that's cute. But again, that's your personal opinion. You've seen throughout the debates in terms of words that are used on television and on radio, some of these words that were used years ago would have gotten you kicked off the air. The FCC would have taken you off the air for the words, the expletives, the phraseology, things that you were saying about each other. You would have been taken off the air. You would not have been allowed to say all these curse words, the vulgarity. You would not have been allowed to say it would be bleeped out. I don't even think we bleep much out anymore. Just anything goes. So that's why I'm constantly throughout this show, for the time that we're together, are asking the question, are the presidential debates reflective of where we are as a society? Because I'm convinced we have gone further and further down. One of the commentators, see, and I know I'm not by myself, because as I watch the news and I listen to talk shows and I look at the commentators and listen to them, they are pretty much saying the same thing regardless of their political affiliation. Whether if it's Republican or whether if it's Democrat, Independent, whatever, they're pretty much coming to that same consensus. Because I was looking last night, I think it was Bob Schieffer, I think that's his name, and he starts off his commentary with, I didn't think we could go any lower, or I didn't think we could sink any lower than we've already sunk until I watched those debates. Have been reduced to name calling, have been reduced to talking about each other's families. You had Donald Trump standing up there yesterday with a bottle of water. That we're hearing from people who are seeking to be the leaders of the country. Now, there's not one thing we've heard out of any of them as to how they're going to do what they say they're going to do. All right. Let's say, for example, you have, like I say all the time, there are 3 words that no one can say the way a politician can say them. And that is the American people. Now, regardless of their background, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of their dialect, it's something about when they say the American people that it all sounds the same. It's almost like a cult, or it's almost like they're in a trance. It's just something about the way they say the American people that it all sounds the same. And I'm saying that to say I have heard nothing yet out of these debates on either side, Republican or Democrat, of how they are going to help the American people. Nothing. In any of the debates yet, I have not heard yet how the American people are going to benefit from what they're going to do. I haven't heard yet how the American people who might be senior citizens ought to probably get a break because they've been on the planet for the last 70, 80, 90 years. Haven't heard anything about that. Haven't heard how pharmaceutical costs probably need to go down, because I can't imagine anybody has to pay $200 for one pill. And then you have to get a bottle of 30 pills per month. I just can't imagine that. So I've heard nobody address that issue of why somebody should have to pay $200 per pill on a bottle of 30 pills that you have to take for 30 days and restock your next 30 days. Haven't heard anybody address that. Haven't heard anybody address, other than Bernie talking about everybody's going to get free college, haven't heard anybody address tuition costs in terms of how are we going to reduce it. I hear them talk about tuition costs, but I haven't heard anybody say how they're going to reduce it, with the exception of Bernie talking about taxing Wall Street. So while they're all up there posturing and being entertainers and doing the dozens on each other and talking about each other's mamas and talking about each other wetting their pants, and this one is a choke artist and this one is a liar, we have yet to hear, how are you going to help, quote unquote, by your words, the American people? You're listening to The Mark Medley Show. All right, we have about 8 minutes left in this show. If you want to get in touch with me, because I'd love to hear your thoughts, tweet me on Twitter at Reading Circle 01. That's READING, the number 0, the number 1. That's where I'm on Twitter. You can catch me there, or you can catch me at Twitter also on at ThinkCritical01. ThinkCritical, the number 0 and the number 1. Because again, that's the two sites you can tweet me. If you heard the show, that's the Critical Thinker. Think Critical 01 and Reading Circle 01. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, are the presidential debates reflective of where we are as a society? Because it's just a shame of what we're witnessing. You know what else probably would help all of us? Because they keep talking about, oh, we love Donald Trump because we're angry. We're all angry. Now, I was sharing this earlier. I'm a talk show junkie, probably more so than the news, because I like to hear both sides. People ask me, why you listen to this show, the conservative show? Why you listen to the Republican show? Why you listen to the Democratic show? I like to listen to both sides because I like to be well-rounded. And most of the time, the ones that do not jive with my beliefs, I don't agree with everything they say, but every now and again they come out with a nugget. So the other day, Glenn Beck says, folks are talking about voting for Donald Trump because they're angry, but the best decisions are not made in anger. And I could not agree more. The best decisions are not. So if we're going to elect Donald Trump based on us being angry, that might not be the best decision and may cost everyone in the long run. So I think we need to put our anger aside and really kind of look logically and clearly looking at any of these candidates, because I'm quite sure, as I said earlier, the world leaders have got to be looking at these and laughing. To that point, you heard Donald and Jeb talking about our safety under George Bush, what have you. Personally, and again, this is a personal belief, I don't believe 9/11 would have happened had Al Gore won that election. I believe the world leaders were looking around to see who was going to win that election, just as they are now, and that determined the next decision they made. I believe once it was official that George Bush was the president, that's when the terrorists decided 9/11 was going to occur. I do not believe 9/11 would have occurred had Al Gore won the presidency, because I don't think Al Gore or Bill Clinton or any of the Democrats had a fight with them. But George Bush, because of his father, did. Matter of fact, George Bush's father, and I'm talking based on reading and research, George Bush's father told George not to go in. And he went in anyway because he thought he was avenging or getting revenge for his father. That was the thinking behind that. And so because Bush had already been leading the first war, that was Daddy Bush, Senior Bush, and now Junior Bush is in there, the world leaders would think, okay, since he won, we're going to go ahead and do this. I don't believe they would have struck under Al Gore. And I believe the world leaders are looking now to see which one of these candidates are going to win. And that will determine how they're going to move. And if Donald Trump is that one, because Donald Trump provokes. He provoked Vicente to say what he said, constantly talking about what they're going to do. He provoked, for lack of a better word, what the Pope said. Donald Trump is very provocative. If Donald wins, you can pretty much rest assured that the world leaders, particularly in those terrorist groups, have plans. Okay, he wants to talk all big and bad, because Donald is not the only one that can talk big and bad. Kim Jong-un, he talks big and bad too. When you start going to some of the other world leaders around the world, they talk big and bad too. It's not going to be just like a business deal that he's sitting around the table negotiating. But even bigger than that, as I said, is the larger social issue of so many things that are out of order. You had yesterday a killing, or day before yesterday, young man who had received a restraining order. He gets angry at that and now goes out into the streets and starts killing people randomly. The day before that, an Uber driver in between pickups is going around randomly killing people. Now, can you imagine that? He's picking up a passenger, drop them to their destination, and in between getting the next passenger, he's out killing other people. Where have we become as a society where we value no life whatsoever? And these same people, when they get in the court of law, will be asking for mercy and leniency in terms of the death penalty or either life in jail. They'll be coming up with every kind of defense in the world as to why they should go free after they've taken somebody else's life. Where are we? Where are we? And where are we going? Because it seems like we're just going lower and lower and lower. At some point, it's got to bottom out. I don't know where that point is, because every time you think we've bottomed out, someone comes up with something even worse. I'm down to my last couple of minutes, but this has been another edition of the Mark Medley Show. You can follow here from time to time. You'll know when it's up and running. I'll be posting it on all the social media sites. As I said, you can contact me on Twitter, Reading Circle 01, Think Critical 01. Give some thought. Are the presidential debates reflective of where we are as a society?